This presentation goes with the StudySync assignment, Quiz, The Story of an Hour. I'm Kathryn J. Walling. This is intended for my students at Horizon High School. It can be used to review the assignment. To complete this lesson, open the quiz, The Story of an Hour, in Google Classroom. You will need to have two windows open on your computer. One window for this video, the second window for the StudySync assignment. You'll know you've got this when you can answer, how do I evaluate details to understand key ideas? How do I use text evidence to support an appropriate response? How do I analyze characters, behavior, and motivations that influence the plot and theme? How do I evaluate the author's use of language? How do I analyze the relationship between thematic development, characterization, point of view, significance of setting, and plot? Compare your answers and reasoning to the correct answers and reasoning. It is even more important to understand why an answer is incorrect or correct than it is to guess the correct answer. The first question is, which sentence from the excerpt shows that Mrs. Mallard is a sensible person? The possible answer choices are A. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. B. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. C. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. D. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. A is correct. This quote shows that Mrs. Mallard is able to accept the significance of her husband's death. B is incorrect because this quote shows Mrs. Mallard expressing emotion. There is a better quote to support her sensibility. C is incorrect because this quote shows Mrs. Mallard expressing emotion. There is a better quote to support her sensibility. D is incorrect because this quote is not related to whether or not Mrs. Mallard is a sensible person. The next question is, what is most closely the meaning of delicious breath as it is used in the following passage, paragraph 5? She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all a-quiver with the new spring of life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song, which someone was singing, reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. The answer choices are A. A smell that is pleasing. B. An overbearing heaviness. C. A welcome sense of relief. D. An appetite for tasty food. A is incorrect. This would be a more literal interpretation, but not the best interpretation. B is incorrect. The use of breath shows life, and the use of delicious indicates something pleasurable. So overbearing heaviness would not be an accurate meaning. C is correct. The context of the text assists with meaning, as there is new spring life, and the rain acts as a symbol of cleansing. D is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. Which paragraph does the author introduce an important discovery that is made by Mrs. Mallard? The answer choices are A, paragraph 4, B, paragraph 8, C, paragraph 9, D, paragraph 10. A is incorrect. This paragraph provides descriptions of the room in which Mrs. Mallard goes. There stood. B is incorrect. This paragraph provides a physical description of Mrs. Mallard. She was young. C is incorrect. This paragraph alludes to a change coming to Mrs. Mallard but does not name it. There was something. D is correct. In paragraph 11, Mrs. Mallard realizes she is free, free, free when she abandoned herself. Which of the following sentences best describes Mrs. Mallard's revelation in the story? The answer choices are A. She begins to feel younger than she really is. B. She sees the flaws in marriage and her relationship. C. She finally enjoys daydreaming about the future. D. Her lifelong fear of trains has finally been vindicated. A is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. B is correct. Mrs. Mallard sees the flaws in her marriage and relationship when she receives the news of her husband's death. C is incorrect. Mrs. Mallard does allow her fancy to run riot about the future, but this is not the realization she has. D is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. Which is one of the main ideas of the story? A. A woman discovers she has felt burdened by her marriage and looks forward to living independently of her husband. A woman resents the overly protective treatment of her sister and struggles to break free from her family. A man tricks his wife into believing he has died to see how she will react. After a tragic train crash, a woman vows to get to the bottom of her husband's death. A is correct. Mrs. Mallard discovers she has felt burdened by her marriage when she learns of her husband's death. B is incorrect. Although Mrs. Mallard's sister seems nosy, kneeling before a keyhole, the passage does not support Mrs. Mallard resenting her sister or wanting to break free from family. C is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. D is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. Which statement from the excerpt most strongly supports the answer to question 5? Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence to which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. D. It was Brett Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. A is incorrect. The quote shows the concern Mrs. Mallard's friends show her, but does not support her newfound independence. B is correct. This quote supports the main idea of the passage, which is Mrs. Mallard's newfound independence. C is incorrect. This quote could be thought to support a distractor, but does not support Mrs. Mallard's newfound independence. D is incorrect. This quote could be thought to support a distractor, but does not support Mrs. Mallard's newfound independence. Which irony is most strongly represented in the story? A. Mrs. Mallard believes her health is fine, but she needs her sister's help to walk around her home. Mrs. Mallard receives news from her friend that her husband has died, but her friend is mistaken. Mrs. Mallard feels oppressed by the sadness of her sister and friend, but they are relieved she will be liberated. Mrs. Mallard's doctors believe she has died from a shock of happiness, but Mrs. Mallard has died from disappointment. A is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. B is incorrect. This is an accurate detail of the passage, but it does not most strongly show an irony of the passage. C is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text to support this answer. D is correct. The irony is that her doctors believe she is overcome with happiness that her husband is alive, when she is actually overcome by disappointment and shock of losing her newfound independence. What paragraph from the excerpt most strongly supports the answer to question 7? A. Paragraph 8. B. Paragraph 18. C. Paragraph 21. D. Paragraph 22. A is incorrect. This paragraph does not provide the irony identified in the answer to the previous question. She was young. B, incorrect. This paragraph does not provide the irony identified in the answer to the previous question. Her fancy was running. C is incorrect. This paragraph does not provide the irony identified in the answer to the previous question. But Richards. D is correct. This paragraph most strongly presents the irony in the previous question by showing what the doctors believe while what the reader knows how Mrs. Mallard truly felt, of joy that kills. Sort the phrases from the excerpt to best show the language that is beautiful, descriptive, or poetic, and the language that provides concrete detail. Each cell will have 4 phrases. They descended the stairs. Her husband's friend Richards was there. A little whispered word escaped her. Veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Opening the front door with a latchkey. Clouds that met and piled one above the other. Crying his wares. She was waiting for it. Beautiful, descriptive, or poetic language includes veiled hints that revealed in half concealing, crying his wares, clouds that met and piled one above the other. A little whispered word escaped her. Concrete details include her husband's friend Richards was there. She was waiting for it. They descended the stairs, opening the front door with a latchkey. Sort the details to best show how Mrs. Mallard reacts to the news of her husband's death and how she reacts to realizing she will live without her husband. Physical exhaustion, keen and bright, pulses beat fast, feverish triumph, storm of grief, dull stare. The reaction to her husband's death include storm of grief, physical exhaustion, dull stare. The reaction to living without her husband include feverish triumph, pulses beat fast, keen and bright. To ask a question, open the assignment in Google Classroom and post a private comment. This links your question to the assignment and allows me to provide a better answer.